one of the podcasts you mentioned, Jackson on History.
Yeah.
He's sponsoring Gloucester History Festival.
Yeah, he's huge. He's a really big guy. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I know, he's super.
And I'd never considered us. I mean, I know it's called She Changed History and you talk about history, but I'd never considered that. I don't really consider it to be history. We're just talking about the past, which sounds ridiculous, I know. But it's like, it's an interesting angle.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. Should we get this show on the road?
I'm ready.
Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Simon.
How are you doing?
I am very well. How are you?
Good. Yeah, very well, thanks. Yeah, it's sunny. I've made a cake.
Bish, bash, bosh.
I mean,
what more do you want from life?
That's the week completed. Yeah.
Congratulations. Sounds great.
Lovely. Well, I've got a story for you today.
Yes.
And I love this one. She is badass. She is badass.
I love it.
I just want you to soak it up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
There will be a bit of an explainer about the geography and society and politics of the time and empires. We're going way back in time. I have a little intro for you. The sands of time often bury the stories of remarkable figures, leaving only faint whispers in the historical record. Among these forgotten narratives is that of Queen Amanirenas, a formidable ruler from ancient Africa who, in the late 1st century BCE, stood against the might of the burgeoning Roman Empire. This was a period dominated by the rise of Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Yet far to the south, in the Kingdom of Kush along the Nile Valley, a queen emerged who would challenge Rome's expansionist ambitions. While the names of Roman emperors and Egyptian pharaohs frequently echo through history, the tale of Amanirenas and her kingdom, located in what is now northern Sudan and southern Egypt, remains largely untold to many. Today we aim to unveil the life, leadership, achievements and enduring legacy of this extraordinary queen, placing her within the rich historical, political and geographical context of her time.
I'm excited.
Yes.
Let's
Correct
go.
Reaction.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about some dates around year 0. And so I'm going to be referring to them as BCE, so before the Common Era, and CE, Common Era, rather than BC and AD. And that's, a few little things to explain along the way, and apologies in advance for my pronunciation on some of these place names, but I will try my darndest. Lots of sources. Main ones are, let me scroll down, World History, Sahel Tours, it's an interesting website, Britannica, a couple of sort of library resources, History Skills, Heritage Daily, and an article on Black History Month.
Great, we'll whack them in the show notes.
Get them in the notes. Yeah, right. Okay, so we are way back in time, 1,000, they say about 1,070 BCE.
Okay.
And we are talking about the Kingdom of Kush, Kush, often referred to as Nubia, situated and flourishing along the Nile River, which is, at the time, as is now really, a lifeline in the sort of arid landscape of northeastern Africa. This kingdom's history spans over a millennium by the time that we'll get to it. It's an ancient civilization, had a long and complex relationship with its northern neighbor, Egypt.
Okay.
And those sort of marked by periods of those trade, cultural exchange, sometimes warfare. And at one point, there was even Kushite rule over Egypt as the 25th dynasty.
So he's the emperor, yeah? He's the top dog.
At the moment, I haven't got to any rulers. Just it's the kingdom, the area.
Oh,
itself,
the kingdom's
the
called
itself.
Kush.
The kingdom
I
is
think
called Kush.
to me, Kush is a name. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
It's like a city being called
clearer.
Elizabeth or something. Yeah. Sorry.
And they've got independence from Egypt around 1,070 BCE, eventually declined around the 4th century CE. Over this time, it had several capital cities, which just reflected these shifts in political power and strategic focus. So initially, its capital city was a place called Kerma, Kerma, and then later, during the height of its power, Napata became the capital around 750 BCE, which is located in northern Kush along the Nile, significant religious center, and it's got these grand temple complex dedicated to the god Amun at the sacred mountain of Jebel Barkel. It's served as a royal burial site. You can really picture it, can't you?
Yeah, make sure at local village hall.
Yes,
cower in comparison.
Hey,
yeah,
don't go knocking the social club, mind.
That's true. Yeah. Sorry, Worrell Hill.
By the time our soon-to-be subject of this, Queen Amanirenas, ascended to power, she came to power around 40 BCE. Okay. The capital had moved further south to Meroe, Meroe. It moved there around 590 BCE, and it was a really good strategic location, offered great strategic advantages. So it gave them a buffer from northern invaders.
Yeah,
and we'll come on more to the sort of strategic advantages of the land shortly. But also this area, it was really rich in iron ore deposits and gold, had loads of acacia forests. So as a result of this, Kush was renowned for its iron industry and its skills in iron working. They had loads of gold. They were exceptional at gold working. A lot of things actually you would normally associate with Egypt, and you hear about with Egypt, of the temples, the pyramids, the gold working.
I've just read a book on excavating in Egypt, and it's giving me all those vibes. It was a fantasy book, and it's given me all the tingles.
Yeah. So it shared a lot of similarities with Egypt, even in aspects like government, religion, and burial practices. But it also had its own traditions and its own language, Meroitic script. The kingdom was really known for its skilled artisans, as I said, especially in gold and iron working. And crucially, they controlled a lot of trade routes that connected sub-Saharan Africa with Egypt and the Mediterranean world. So because they were located on the Nile, they had plenty of weaponry, they had plenty of control, they were a powerful kingdom, and they would control this flow of trade from south to north.
Gosh.
It was a monarchy.
Okay.
So during Amanirenas' reign in the late 1st century BCE, the Kingdom of Kush, it was governed by a monarchy that included not only kings, but also very powerful queens. Mm-hmm. And they were known by the title of Candace, Candace, Candaces. We don't actually know the succession practices of...
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. And kind of the reason we don't know about this, a lot of this story has come from Roman writings. So people like Pliny the Elder, Strabo, Cassius Dio wrote about the goings-on of the Kush Empire, but of course that's from the Roman point of view. From the Kush point of view, it's mostly just archaeological finds that we've got that inform the stories and maybe give us a different point of view to the Roman one. They sort of correlate to the Roman narrative, but then give us maybe an alternative view of how it actually played
context.
Out. Yeah. Meroitic script, we still haven't really deciphered.
Wow.
So if we do eventually decipher it, then there will be sort of more to know, more confirmed.
That must be because it's so much earlier. It's like 1,500 years earlier.
It's a lot earlier, yeah. And we haven't found the Rosetta Stone for Meroitic, So the Rosetta Stone, have you heard of the Rosetta Stone?
Yeah.
This is a stone that was found engraved in 3 different scripts. It was hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek, and it was the same passage in each script. So that allowed us, because we knew the Greek, we could therefore figure out the hieroglyphic and Demotic script. So our understanding of Egyptian hieroglyphs comes from this initial translation that we figured out from the Rosetta Stone, and is why we can decipher the hieroglyphs.
Then became Duolingo.
Ultimately. It was hieroglyphs, Demotic, Greek, and modern conversational Italian. All of it.
Very cool.
So the Candaces, the queens, so we don't know their succession practices, but what is not in doubt is the power and respect given to these royal women. They really held prominence in the Kushite society, particularly during this Meroitic period of around sort of 590 BCE onwards. The term Candice is a Latinized version of a Meroitic term Kentaki or Kandaki, which could mean Queen Regent, Queen Mother, Royal Woman, but they had their own specific title and were really regarded, much like actually the Egyptians as well. They were held in high esteem, and Amanirenas is one of the most renowned of these Candices. The political climate at the time of her reign was really heavily influenced by the rise of the Roman Empire under Augustus. So he was their first emperor, and he consolidated power. And then in around 30 BCE, annexed Egypt, following the defeat of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. So this then, with Egypt defeated, it meant that the Romans were at the border of the Kush, of the Kingdom of Kush.
Because they were below, so it's like the next one down. Yeah, next one down along the Nile.
Yeah. Amanirenas ascended to power probably around 25 BCE, following the death of her husband, Teratake. She inherited this kingdom that had a long history of interaction with Egypt, a lot of political and trade ties, but now had this imperial power right on their doorstep.
Yeah.
And
she has to lead through it. That's her.
And she has to lead through it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm in. Let's go.
And
it's very exciting.
Roman wanted a piece of that.
Of course they did. They were unstoppable. Those pesky
They want
Romans.
A piece of everything, but
they do. They're so greedy.
And it was Kush was such a crucial, I want to say, sort of bottleneck or something, or
like a linchpin kind of thing.
Yeah, in this, because they controlled all the trade routes to the south, and they themselves had enormous resources.
If they were taxing and they had the gold, and it's a power, isn't it? They're in a real power.
Yeah. So the name Nubia, that the Kingdom of Kush was also known by, is thought to come from the Egyptian word for gold. N-U-B.
I was going to say, I have heard of it before.
Yeah.
Is it something we use in modern day as well? Is it like a phone brand or something? I'm sure I've heard of it before. Yeah.
Maybe. It lives on.
It means gold. It lives on.
It basically means gold. So it's the Kingdom of Gold, really. Said iron ore is a crucial resource. So it's a major centre for iron production, earned it the moniker of the iron capital of ancient Africa. And they also had valuable resources at the time, things like ivory, ebony, animal skins, precious stones.
This is fascinating.
And the Nile really was the lifeblood. It provides all this fertile land for agriculture. It's vital for transportation, for trade, and a source of water in what is otherwise a sort of arid desert climate. And then you have these cataracts, they're called. They're sort of on a river, you have clusters of waterfalls or areas where the river is no longer like free flowing and they're an obstacle. They're basically a stopper in the river. They're these natural barriers, and that's where trade and interaction occurs. And so Nubia had these around there that were sort of focal points for all of this. So the Romans have conquered Egypt. Sorry, Cleopatra, you're out.
Yeah, it's a classic move.
Absolute classic Roman move. And although Kush has had this centuries-long history of interaction, largely successful interaction with Egypt, Rome comes along, things escalate. There's open conflict. It's known as the Kushite-Roman Wars. And this is what largely defined Amanirenas' leadership. So she's part of this long lineage of powerful Candices, these queens of Kush, and becomes known for only having one eye.
Oh. And is that because she's a fighter?
Because she's a fighter. Yeah. So it's suspected. The accounts come mostly from the writings of a Greek historian, but the most plausible explanation is that she was fighting the Romans,
defending,
and lost an eye, which...
I mean, this comes up again and again in our stories, that women are at the forefront. Like Zenobia, she was at the forefront on her horse, on the camels, doing the stuff. Like, they're not just sat pretty on their thrones, are they? Yeah. Like, you're in a battle losing an eye.
Yeah. And she carries on ruling. She's like, I don't have any pictures of her, but I'm just imagining a true sort of African warrior queen. This absolute indomitable force. And there's consistency in the Roman sources suggesting that her having one eye was a really notable characteristic.
Of
And
course.
if
And
anything,
scary, I think.
well,
Like,
exactly, yeah.
not in a people without eyes are scary, but it's a badge of honor, isn't it? In a weird way.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, that she's formidable and that
Formidable is
yeah.
the word, yeah. And I really emphasized this formidable nature that she had. The war, these Kushite-Roman Wars, which spanned approximately 25 to 22 BCE, so 3 to 4 years, initially started by the Kushites, or that's what kicked it off.
So they went on the attack.
Well, less on the attack, but more sort of incursions into the Roman-controlled Egypt. And these were likely response. So you could say the Rome started it. These sort of raids that they did into Egypt, now under Roman control, were suspected to be in response to Rome's imposition of taxes on the region, for example, and just its general aggressive expansionist policy of wanting to take over and dominate everything. So it soon escalates into a war. And initially, under Amanirenas, the Kushite forces achieved some success.
Okay.
So they captured key Roman-occupied cities such as Syene, Elephantine, and Philae.
Mm-hmm.
They also, one of my favorite bits, in an act of defiance, during one of these captures, Amanirenas cut off the head of a statue of Emperor Augustus.
Oh my God, that is like a movie. Isn't that like a...
Yeah.
That was part of like a team building exercise or something, wasn't it? Like, come on, guys.
She chops off the head.
Yeah, casually.
Takes it home with her.
Does she?
And buries it under the steps of her temple.
Oh.
So it's
that's an odd response to trauma, isn't it?
Bury that I did deep. A very similar thing in primary school, and I love this idea that they, as like a sign of the victory, they are now trampling, they are climbing on the head of the Roman Emperor.
That's what I mean. Like,
literally stomping on.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Rome wasn't chuffed about this.
They've been known to get a bit angry.
a bit aggy.
Yeah.
The Roman prefect of Egypt, a fellow called Gaius Petronius, led a very strong force into Kush, eventually capturing the capital, Napata, and establishing, the former capital, Napata, and establishing a new Roman frontier further south.
Okay.
But despite this success, Amanirenas did not yield. She did not capitulate. She continued to lead her forces. She continued fighting on in resistance against this Roman occupation. So she had this real resilience, and especially with the capital, Meroe, now further south, she had this real strategic acumen.
She must have had backing as well. You can't just say, we're going to keep going. You can't just say, we're going to do it. You need...
Well,
especially in such bloody fighting.
Yeah, it's interesting. They did have... I mean, the Roman Empire is almost impossibly large and powerful at this point.
Exactly, yeah.
But the Kingdom of Kush did have some advantages, and these are the ones that Amanirenas really leveraged. It had a really strategic location.
Yeah.
So the terrain was unusual for the Romans. They weren't used to fighting in this sort of terrain. They could really funnel them down a bit like Thermopylae, I suppose. They had abundant natural resources, particularly iron for weaponry. So they weren't going to run out of weapons anytime soon, and they were incredibly skilled at this ironwork, this forging. And they had very, very skilled archers. Egyptians called the region Tarseti, which is the land of the bow. So not only did they make these weapons, but they really, my God, they knew how to use them. So they were a much smaller force up against this almost impossibly large force of the Roman Empire.
But they were skilled.
They were skilled, and they really knew what they had. They really knew how to use. And this really long-standing tradition of very strong leadership, including these powerful female rulers like Amanirenas, which I think must have just G'd up the forces. And if you see your
camaraderie, patriotism, you know, all those feelings. Yeah.
Matriatism. Is that a word?
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice what I'd said. You're right.
I don't know if that is a word,
Patriarchy.
but there we are. You fell for the patriarchy. So this conflict just went on and on for a lot longer than I think the Romans were used to. And
Oh, really? So
eventually,
they're grinding them down as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this has really got echoes of Qin to me. It eventually led to negotiations.
Ah,
And
yes. Which is
like
a tactic in itself, isn't it? What's that thing called? Where you grind people down so much?
siege warfare,
Yeah, isn't it? Pretty much.
just until they can't go on
Yeah.
any longer. But Augustus stepped in and negotiated. He was
Ah.
willing to negotiate. And the peace treaty that they had was, if anything, quite favourable to Kush, considering the overwhelming size of the Roman forces. So they didn't demand a tribute, some sort of sacrifice, and they withdrew from many of the occupied territories.
What?
So
this is amazing.
There's something about Amanirenas' just determination and resilience, and
because she would have been in those conversations at the forefront, demanding, leading, because it's a psychological game as well, isn't it? Warfare. This is what I mean. Women have always fought. Yeah.
Absolutely. And she was, this is a world sort of dominated by male leaders.
Yeah.
But her strength, it was her courage, her political skill, her leadership really stood out. And this resilience that she showed in not simply capitulating against what seems like an impossible to beat force. She strung them out for long enough to get a result that preserved this Kushite independence. So they weren't overrun, they weren't taken over by the Romans, and they survived about another 400 years.
Wow.
And she established this period of relative peace then, and trade between Kush and Roman Egypt for nearly 300 years it went on.
Oh, so she even put in a trade deal.
Yeah.
They must have really wanted Kush for its resources then. Yeah.
Resources and the control it had over those trade routes.
Yeah, it's that port. Yeah.
Yeah, I've just put in really the fact that Rome, at the zenith of its power, under this great Augustus, were compelled to negotiate a peace deal, just sort of really underscores these complexities they have of imperial expansion and the costs involved. If they've got a really determined opponent, these costs in subjugating them. And in the end, Amanirenas made it clear that it was just better for the Roman Empire not to try and conquer them, but instead work with them. And like, you can have our resources, but you'll pay us for them. We'll trade you for them.
Right.
This is going to be, we're not being taken over here. Our understanding of Amanirenas' reign and this Kingdom of Kush mostly comes from archaeological findings. So Meroe itself, pyramids, temples, they found remnants of the ironworking industries. So you have this really tangible evidence of the Kushite civilization at this time. They've even found the bronze head of Augustus buried at a Kushite temple.
They found what she buried?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So it wasn't like a legend or anything. It was nope, this is definitely
the head was
we've
there.
discovered it.
Yeah. And
God,
just shows
it's bronze. Jeez.
Flipping it. It was. But it shows her understanding as well of like symbolic warfare. It's not just the actual fight itself, but it's this building yourself up to be even more formidable than you actually may be.
This is what I mean. It's like really psychological, isn't it? A game as well, psychologically as well as physically. Yeah, it's not just who the biggest tank is. It is, all these mini little power plays, and also the standing power. Like you said, she said, "No, you will pay for our resources. You're not just taking them. You will pay." It's not even like you could have a little bit. It's like a full-on. No, this is not how this is going to go. That's so powerful in itself. I think we could all learn a bit of putting in those boundaries.
Boundaries is the word. Yeah. Know your line and stick to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's quite a scary thing to do, isn't it? Because it feels like an all or nothing sort of approach. And
especially
if they did
against the Roman Empire in one of its peaks.
Hopefully, we will in time learn more about her reign. They have found a number of stelae. They're called stelae, which are these big stone. I don't want to say gravestones. They're not used as gravestones, but they're that sort of size. It's these massive stone things into which there are inscriptions made. But it's in the Meroitic language, and there's very little of that we currently deciphered. So there's probably a lot more sort of clues and information about her life,
to come out.
Yeah, and to get more.
Have you seen that thing that's doing the rounds on the internet at the minute? That someone in the Roman Empire complained they got a delivery of copper, and then they wrote a little scripture of their complaint about the grade of copper, and it wasn't what they ordered, and it would have taken them.
That's amazing.
About like 6 hours to like carve this complaint, like chisel it out. And it was.
Oh, I love that.
Show in the British Museum, and it says complaint about copper grade or something.
Dear so-called copper trader. In work, say I can always tell when I'm disgruntled, because apparently each of my key taps is like a stabbing the keyboard. I just imagine this guy furiously.
It's just exactly
the whole of that time. I love it.
This is so funny.
So it'd be great to know more about it from the Kush perspective, because so much of what we've got is from the point of view of the Romans.
Yeah, so from a time span then, because you said there was like 400 years of peace after that, that would have probably crossed over into Zenobia's timeline. You know, because she was like Assyria against Egypt at some point, and so their stories probably cross, is my a little guess. I don't know. Obviously, they probably weren't alive at the same time, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that we don't know these women, and we've managed to find in our very short lifetime two that cross, and again with really similar themes about standing your ground, just sticking to your own lane, just focusing, you know, and
he's clearly really
both
well
with success stories. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well respected. That's such a good comparison. Because so often, she must have been. You can't go up against the Roman Empire if you're not.
And she got in there. She was involved. She proved herself. I mean, it sounds like their society already respected and held in very high regard these queens, but she was in it. Yeah. And it contrasts for me so much these days. There's this idea that female CEOs usually get brought in when they know the company's going under.
Yeah, it's called the glass cliff, isn't it?
The glass cliff, that's it.
There's a bit of an argument that's happening right now with Rachel Reeves, that she was handed a dog poo of an economy, and, you know, they thought, oh, a woman would be great in here. It's so hard to, I feel a bit funny about that what do you think about it as a theory?
I'm not it's the correlation causation sort of aspect, and I'm not sure. I think it's mostly representative that it's so much more difficult for female CEOs to get into that position, and therefore they maybe more often get the sort of lower hanging fruit, which tends to be the companies that are on the downer anyway, rather than a deliberate, we'll palm it off so that we can blame it on the woman.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a conscious decision. But I think there's something in it, but I'm not sure there's somebody sat there being that foreshadowing in the nicest way. I don't think they think about it that much, which is and this is even worse in a way.
And this is what makes me not believe conspiracy theories in general, in that I just don't think people can be that organized to make these massive schemes. I just don't think people are that good or that clever. I think it's mostly negligence and ineptitude.
Yeah.
But then you can try and attribute it to decision making or a deliberate act, but I think rarely it is. But anyway, Queen Amanirenas. Totally badass.
Yeah, that's a really interesting part of history as well that we don't often hear about. So it sounds like that her story sounds like a little spark, like such a blip in history. But actually, if that led to 400 years, like that's from like the Tudors to now. That is. If you think about that, we've covered the Industrial Revolution, we've covered the Digital Revolution. Like so much has happened in those 400 years. Yet her reign and her
But the
stamina
consequences of it,
are down to her.
Yeah.
Come on, that is badass. That's pretty cool.
it's proper badass.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
I know. So I was really excited. I can't believe I've almost kept to time. This was really fun to read about.
Yeah,
All those shoots.
nice. And very out of your comfort zone as well.
Yeah, not a Victorian scientist.
Oh,
So
yeah, well done you.
Thank
Who
you.
knew?
Oh, me. Yeah, it's been a revelation.
Yeah, brilliant. And then, so when did Kush? Do we know when Kush fell? Because it's
Yeah, around 350.
okay.
350 Common Era. And it's
And where
now,
did it go to?
so it's now split. What used to be Kush is now split between Egypt and Sudan.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, maybe we can get like an old map or something of where it was. That would be quite cool.
Get an overlay.
Just to yeah, definitely. It kind of makes you want to learn more. It makes you want to.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
It just makes me want to
Go
learn
off.
more about all of the, because I know very little about African history,
I
but
know.
to know more
yeah.
about, I mean, the Egyptians to me were just a very long time ago.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, same.
But even to like just talk about the Egyptians is mad because it covers thousands of years.
Mm.
You say like ancient Egypt and think of it as a thing. I always used to think of it, like the Tudors, they just came along, built pyramids, and that was that. But the ancient Egypt spanned from 3150 BCE to about 30 BC. So it's like over 3,000 years. So ancient Egypt,
millennia. Oh
it was
God.
around for 50% longer than the time between Christ and where we are now.
Oh my gosh.
It's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's all this history in there.
Yeah, because also history is like dinosaurs. Egyptians, pretty much. Tudors, Victorians now.
Yeah. All given about equal.
Yeah.
Equal
Henry
standard.
VIII gets an awful lot of that.
Yeah, if you compare him to the time of dinosaurs, you just thought Henry VIII lived for about 300 million years.
This is why we exist. This is why we're trying to, make our own curriculum, aren't we?
I hope so.
We're taught. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I hope so.
A nice one.
Hope you enjoyed.
I did. Yeah,
Thanks
I want
very
to do
much.
more. It's kind of like just that feels like an appetizer, haven't we?
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, we need to go further. We need to go deeper. But I'm excited. We can do that. We've got time.
Definitely.
Brilliant.
Cool. Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to go and decorate a cake.
Enjoy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of She Changed History. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Find us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you've got any ideas of women you'd like us to cover in a future episode, please comment on the socials or email us at shechangedhistory@gmail.com.